It all started like any other routine flight: passengers boarding, flight attendants smiling, and the usual pre-flight announcements filling the cabin. But what no one expected was a shocking moment that would leave the entire plane in stunned silence. A woman, calm and composed, tried to address a simple issue with her seat. But instead of being treated with respect, she was met with something no one should ever face: disrespect and aggression from someone who should have known better. The pilot, clearly agitated, confronted her in front of everyone. Words were exchanged, tensions rose, and then something happened that crossed a serious line. The pilot, in a split-second decision he would soon regret, lashed out in a way that no one on board could believe. What he didn't know, what none of the passengers knew, was that this woman wasn't just any passenger. She was the chief of police, off duty and traveling quietly. She had spent years serving and protecting her community, trained to stay calm under pressure, and now she was forced into a situation no one should ever have to endure. The expressions on the faces around her shifted from confusion to disbelief. Phones came out, people started whispering, and the pilot, well, his world was about to turn upside down the moment he realized who he had just messed with. As the murmurs spread across the cabin, the woman slowly stood up, her calm presence only making the situation more intense. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't make a scene, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet authority that made even the flight attendants step back. People around her were still trying to understand what had just happened. Who was this woman? And why did she carry herself with such confidence in the face of clear mistreatment? A few rows back, a man whispered to his wife, "Did you see her badge?" Another passenger was already texting what had happened to someone back home. The pilot, now clearly realizing that something was off, began to shift uncomfortably. His earlier arrogance was giving way to uncertainty. He hadn't asked her name. He hadn't looked twice at her credentials. He had just made an assumption, and now it was starting to cost him. What no one knew yet was that she had just returned from a law enforcement conference. She had spent the week speaking to other top officials about leadership, accountability, and community respect. And now here she was, facing the exact kind of behavior she had dedicated her career to changing. The cabin was still, the tension thick, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. The air inside the plane felt heavier now. Flight attendants exchanged glances, unsure of whether to step in or stay silent. A quiet announcement came over the speaker, something about a brief delay before takeoff, but no one was really listening anymore. All eyes were either on the woman or the pilot, who had retreated toward the cockpit, avoiding eye contact as he whispered something to a crew member. In the back row, a young woman who had recorded the entire incident looked down at her phone, hesitating before hitting send. She wasn't sure what the fallout would be, but something about what just happened didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just about race or gender, it was about respect, about power, and about what happens when the people in charge forget their responsibility. Meanwhile, the chief stood quietly, still not revealing who she was. She didn't flash her badge. She didn't shout her title. She watched and waited. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated, but it was the first time someone had crossed such a line in such a public place. And it wasn't just about her anymore. This was about what message would be sent to everyone watching. In first class, a businessman who had overheard everything pulled out his laptop and opened a news site. If this went public, the airline was going to have a serious problem on its hands, and they didn't even know it yet. The pilot finally emerged from the cockpit, this time with a forced calm in his expression. His voice was low but tight as he addressed the cabin, avoiding specifics and vaguely asking for patience due to an unexpected delay. But everyone knew what the delay was about. The woman hadn't moved from her spot. She wasn't causing a scene, but her quiet strength had shifted the whole atmosphere on board. Behind the scenes, the airline's operations team had already been contacted. One of the flight attendants had discreetly informed them of a passenger incident, though the report left out crucial details. Still, the presence of bystanders, phones, and live social media activity meant the story was already escaping the aircraft. The young woman in the back finally hit send, her video now making its way across group chats and online platforms. People were already reacting. It wasn't just about what happened anymore, it was about who it happened to. A black woman, a high-ranking police official, someone who had dedicated her life to justice and fairness, now being publicly disrespected by someone in uniform. Whispers turned into quiet conversations. Some passengers began asking questions, wondering if they'd be asked to deplane. The chief still hadn't said a word about who she was. She was waiting for what? No one knew. But one thing was certain, the next move would change everything. Just as the tension seemed like it couldn't get any thicker, a voice crackled over the intercom, this time from the airline's ground security team. The plane, moments from taxiing, was ordered to return to the gate. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Passengers started shifting in their seats, trying to piece together what was really going on. The chief of police remained calm, still silent, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She knew this wasn't routine. The pilot, now visibly uneasy, made another vague announcement about technical concerns, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the handset. He hadn't expected this to go beyond the cabin. He certainly hadn't expected upper management to get involved so fast. But they had. And what he didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that someone on the flight crew had recognized the woman. Quietly, without any attention, they had sent her name through the airline's internal system, and that's when everything shifted. The chief's identity was no longer a secret. Within minutes, the airline's legal team was alerted. News was starting to break online. Hashtags were forming. The story wasn't just about a pilot and a passenger anymore. It was becoming a headline. A corporate crisis. A PR nightmare. And just as passengers thought the drama had reached its peak, another officer boarded the plane, but not for who everyone expected. The cabin went completely silent as the uniformed officer stepped onto the plane. Passengers turned in their seats, phones still in hand, eyes locked on the unfolding scene. The pilot stood near the front, trying to maintain his composure, but his face had gone pale. Everyone assumed the officer was there for the chief of police, to get her statement or maybe escort her off for questioning. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. The officer walked right past the chief, nodding to her with a subtle sign of respect, and stopped in front of the pilot. "Captain, I need you to step off the aircraft," he said firmly. The pilot's eyes widened. "Wait, me," he stammered. "There's been a misunderstanding." But there wasn't. The airline had already reviewed the report. The video had gone viral in minutes. And the chief's identity, paired with witness accounts, left no room for misinterpretation. He had crossed a line, and the consequences had come faster than anyone expected. As the pilot was quietly escorted off the plane, whispers erupted once again. Some passengers clapped. Others just sat in disbelief. The chief remained composed, only now giving a small nod of appreciation to the officer. But just as the plane began preparing to taxi once more, her phone buzzed with a message from her department. It wasn't over. A new development had come in from her office. The pilot, he was already under investigation for a past complaint, one that had mysteriously disappeared, until now. As the plane finally taxied down the runway, the tension that had gripped the cabin began to dissipate. Passengers were still buzzing with disbelief, their phones alive with notifications about what had just transpired. The pilot, now officially under investigation, would face a lot more than just public scrutiny. The airline had already initiated a full internal review of the incident, and it seemed this was only the beginning for him. His past behavior, now being scrutinized, would likely lead to serious consequences. For the chief of police, though, the moment had passed. She didn't seek attention, didn't boast about her role or what had happened. She simply returned to her seat, her quiet dignity intact. As the plane soared into the sky, passengers couldn't help but reflect on the deeper message of the day: respect, accountability, and the power of standing up for what's right, even in the most unexpected circumstances. As the chief looked out the window, she thought about the conference she had just left, a place filled with discussions on leadership, change, and justice. Little did she know, her own actions would serve as a powerful reminder of those very values. The pilot's regret was clear, but for the chief, the battle wasn't just about what happened on that plane, it was about ensuring this never happened again.